Okay, well, welcome to the Mark Allen Coaching Facebook Live chat taking place in the shed where I do shed talks. I give tips and coaching advice and tell stories in those. Today's live chat is going to be pretty fun. In 2 weeks from now will be the Nice, the Ironman 70.3 World Championship races in Nice. The women on Saturday, the men on Sunday, September 7th and 8th. And so I just wanted to tell some race secrets, things that I learned during my races that I had at the Nice International Triathlon. If you don't know, I raced in Nice 10 times. I won 10 of those races, undefeated. I don't know how I did that. It was 1 year at a time. Each year there were different people who were challenging me for the win. Each year the race was a very different dynamic. There were never two races where I could just take the template from one and put it onto the next one that was coming up, But there were lessons that eventually did help me to just keep going on that roll. A little bit of the history. The Nice Triathlon started in 1982. It was held in November of 1982 over Thanksgiving Day weekend. It was originally going to take place in Monaco, but unfortunately, a few months before the race, Princess Grace died in a terrible car crash, and so they decided there was going to be a moratorium in Monaco on any kind of sporting event or celebratory event for 1 year. So all of a sudden, the race directors had to completely move the venue. It landed in Nice, which actually turned out to be a pretty amazing thing because the race is still going on. Now it's an Ironman, but that very first year, the race was supposed to be a 3K swim, a 100K bike, and then a marathon, 42 kilometers. So you can see that the swim was not the biggest part of the day. The bike, 60 miles, 100 kilometers, okay, but then a marathon. So it was definitely run heavy. It was cold. It was so cold that actually on race morning, the race directors decided that they were going to cut the swim in half because in 1982 there were no wetsuits and the water was somewhere around 56 degrees, which was pretty darn cold. I don't think many of us would have made it out if we had gone the full distance. I would not have. I would have completely froze up because even at 1,500 meters, I barely made it out of the water, but I was ecstatic because I did make it out of the water. The bike ride goes through the Maritime Alps as it has now every year. Just incredible cycling through these small villages, amazing climbs, crazy descents. They're not scary because they're so technical that you really have to slow down. It's not like you're going at breakneck speeds. It's just kind of winding down through these valleys and then coming back into the town of Nice. But the marathon, that's where the key is in that very first year for me. I had never run a marathon before. This was going to be my first marathon. I didn't know how to cover the distance. A number of the other competitors that I was racing against had a lot of experience at it. Scott Molina was there. Scott Tinley was there. They had both raced Ironman a number of times. They'd both run marathons. Molina had a personal best, I think, right around 2:20. So he knew how to run that distance. I had one goal in the marathon, and that was to minimize the pounding impact on my legs as much as I could, which meant that my one goal on that marathon was to run as smooth and steady as I could, sort of like I was just floating across the ground as opposed to really pounding on the pavement. So I just broke it down to one thing that was just a basic form thing that I was going to focus on. And it actually really distracted me from thinking about pace and everything else. And when my legs did start to get a little bit tired, I didn't really notice them because even as they started to get tired towards the end of the marathon, the focus again was to just run as smooth and steady as I could. At about the half marathon point, Scott Molina had been leading and I came up behind him. And as I waited for a second, I needed to kind of figure out how fast he was going, how to try to, tune into, was he strong? Was he weak? Was he waiting for me? Was he giving everything he had? And it just seemed like he was kind of at the pace that he was going to be able to hold and not go any faster. So I thought, okay, let me rest a little bit, get my energy back because I had to make up a chunk of time to catch him. And then as I was going by him, I noticed that he was doing the opposite of what I was focused on. I was trying to run as smooth and steady and even with my head not bobbing up and down, with not pounding the ground. He was doing the opposite. He was just hitting the ground with every footstep. And so as I went by him, I go, "Hey Scott, try to run more steady so you don't beat your legs up." A year later, when we became actually closer friends, he said, "Remember when you passed me in Nice that first year on the marathon and you told me how to run?" I'm thinking, who is this guy? He hasn't ever run a marathon before and he's telling me how to run? Anyway, the lesson from that is in each of the three sports and in the race itself, have just something really basic that you can focus on, that you can bring yourself back to engaging in the race with, so that no matter what's going on, whether you're where you want to be, whether you're faster, whether you're slower, whether your competition is in front of you or behind you, you can just stay in your zone, whatever that is. And the easiest thing is to have just a simple form cue that you can think of. Maybe on the bike it's keep my shoulders relaxed, keep my shoulders relaxed. Maybe, again on the run, like it was for me, run smooth, run steady, run level so that I'm not pounding on the pavement. That ended up being my first win in Nice, a very significant win. A couple years later, in 1985, I woke up race morning. I had a fever. I was achy. And I thought, I can't race. There's no way I can race this thing. And then I was in my hotel room and, everything was prepared. I got sick in the middle of the night. I don't know where it came from. But I thought, well, I flew all the way over here from California. It's Nice, France. I'd won 82, 83, 84, so I was the returning champion. I thought the least that I can do is to start the swim. If I'm feeling terrible at the end of the swim, I can always pull out, but at least I will know that I have tried. And so I went down to the swim start, got everything ready, did the swim, came out of the water, and I still felt pretty achy, and I could tell I still had a fever, and I was ready to pull out, and I thought, well, I flew all the way from California, maybe I'll just start the bike ride. I can always pull out. I'll get a ride back into town if I pull out halfway through the thing, or maybe I'll finish the ride. I don't know. So I got on my bike, started riding, came in off the bike, and the distance had changed now. It was a 3K swim. It was a 120K bike, and then the run was a 30K run. So they lengthened the bike, they shortened the run. So anyway, I came off the bike, still feeling a little bit achy, but a little bit better than I had when I woke up that morning. And I was ready to pull out, and I thought, no, just start the run. You can always stop. I started the run. I started passing guys. With about 7 miles to go, there was only one guy ahead of me, Scott Tinley. And that's the moment when I realized, wait a minute, I woke up this morning achy, fevery, thinking I couldn't even start the race. I started the race, and now here I am in the closing miles of the run. There's only one guy ahead of me. I'm in second place. Amazing. Eventually I did pass Scott, went on for that next win. And so the lesson from that is a very simple one. It doesn't matter how you feel when you wake up in the morning. If you feel great, that's wonderful. If you're not in the mood, or maybe you feel a little sick, or you just don't feel like your mojo is ready to go, start it anyway, because everything can slowly turn around in the race. That was a big lesson for me. You don't have to feel perfect to race the perfect race. And this goes for a lot of different scenarios that could come up. Maybe there's something off in your bike ride, or you can't get going on the run, whatever it is. Maybe the swim you get kicked and you lose your goggles. Keep going. It doesn't have to be the perfect day for you to have the perfect race. I would say a win is a pretty darn perfect race. A couple years later, 1982, I had perhaps the most iconic race that I ever had in Nice. There, in 1984, one of the young French triathletes, Yves Cordier, did his first Nice race. He's a great swimmer, an incredible cyclist. The run was not quite up to par with his first two events. Each one of the years that he raced, he came in off the bike ahead of me. In 1992, he came in 7.5 minutes ahead of me off the bike. 7.5 minutes. Now the run, remember, is a 32K run, so it's 10 miles out, 10 miles back, straight out along the Promenade des Anglais, along the Côte d'Azur, along the Mediterranean, dead flat. You do it one turn, and then you head back for the second half of the run. At the turnaround, I'd only made up 2.5 minutes. So I'm thinking, okay, I made up 2.5 minutes in 10 miles. I still have 5 minutes to make up. If I keep running this steady, normal pace that I'm comfortable doing, I am not going to win this race. So I thought, what can I do? And I thought, okay, let me try to adopt the mindset of a pure runner. And so I thought, I'm going to just surge as hard as I can for as long as I can until I can't stand it anymore. And then I'm going to back off and recover, do it again, do it again, do it again, and see if I can somehow make up those 5 minutes. Now, Yves Cordier in the lead, you know, he lives in Nice. He's the son of Nice, the fils de Nice, and he had this giant entourage of people following him. He had motorcycles and people on mopeds and people on bicycles just cheering because they were thinking, finally, we're going to have a French champion in the men's side of this race. I surged until I couldn't hold it anymore, and then I backed off. I surged again, I backed off. I surged again, I backed off. I kept doing that in those closing 10 miles. Finally, I was able to see that just mass of humanity way up the road, knowing that all of those people were indicating that Yves was up there in front of them somewhere. With about 5K to go, or at 3 miles roughly, I finally came up on the back of the group of just hundreds of cheering French people giving Yves all this energy. Nobody knew I was coming. That entire group had no idea that I was coming. And one guy turned around and looked back, and I thought he was going to have a heart attack when he saw me, because he knew what was happening. I surged, I backed off. I surged, I backed off. Slowly, I was able to work my way through this group of people who were following Yves. Finally, I was able to see him up ahead of me. I surged, I backed off. I surged, I backed off. Finally, there was a sign that said 500 meters to the finish. When I saw that sign was exactly the moment when I passed Yves. 500 meters to go in the race. It was a tough pass, and I'll tell you why, because he and I are great friends, and I knew that it would be really, really hard for him to be in the lead for that long and to see it slip away with 500 meters to go. I've been in those kind of situations. They are hard to pick up the pieces and keep going in your career. But I knew that racing is about giving your best, whatever your best is on that day. And ultimately, great races are being inspired by other competitors who are having a great race also. Yves inspired me on that day to come up with a strategy that I had never even thought of before. And so that's the lesson that came to me from that race, is that, yeah, you have your idea of how you're going to pace the race, how you're going to achieve the dream that you have for the day. But something might happen that will require you to come up with a solution that you never in a million years would have thought of had you not been put in a difficult spot. I was in a difficult spot. I was undefeated in that race. I was hoping to win my 9th Nice title that year. And Yves was so far ahead, and he was holding it better than he'd ever done before. And so it took a few minutes to come up with that strategy. Surge and back off, surge and back off, surge and back off. So no matter what's going on in your race, if you need a new strategy, tune in, try to figure out what is it that I need to do to come up with a day that I had dreamed that I could when I started. The final year I raced the Nice Triathlon was in 1993. I was hoping that this would be win number 10. And there was a triathlete there who was doing the race for his first time, Simon Lessing, an ITU world champion. This guy is one of the toughest competitors ever to enter the sport of triathlon, and he's one of the best runners ever to enter the sport of triathlon. I had no idea how Simon would adapt to the increased length of the race, but I knew that he would probably be the person, if he had a good day, who was going to challenge me if I was also having a good day. Simon came in off the bike a little bit ahead of me. I don't know exactly how far ahead. He's a much better swimmer than I am. So I knew there was no chance that I was going to come out of the water with him. I knew that if he had a good bike ride, I would not catch him on the bike. And so the whole way through the swim and the bike, not knowing where Simon was, I was just trying to stay on my pace, stay on top of it, so that when I came off the bike, I would at least be in good enough position to hopefully somehow run him down if he was having a great run. He was ahead of me coming in. I don't know how far ahead he was. I came into the transition. I put on my running shoes and I turned to run out of transition. And there was Simon just standing there waiting for me. He was standing there waiting for me. And I realized, this guy is really, really sharp. He knows that he's never raced this distance in a triathlon before, a 32-kilometer run. He knows that I know how to pace it. He's waited for me because it's much, as they say, keep your friends close and your enemies closer. He wanted to be right next to me so that hopefully he could use my knowledge and my skill to come up with a run that hopefully would eventually enable him to be the champion on that day. We started out on the run. Right away, he pulled in behind me. He was going to draft me on the run, and you know, it's a small advantage, but it's an advantage. It gives you more. I was breaking the wind for both of us. Also, he could just keep a pulse on how I was doing on my form and everything, and I wouldn't be able to see him at all. And I go, Simon, get up here. I'm not going to have you run behind me the whole way of this run. So he kind of came around and stayed there for a little bit, and then the next thing I know, he'd slid back behind me. And I go, Simon, this isn't going to work. He came around, stayed there for a little bit, and then he pulled back behind me again. And so I thought, all right. So I ran across to the other side of the road. Simon followed me. I ran back to the middle. He followed me. Like, finally, I go, Simon. And so he finally came around, and he actually took a little bit of the lead for a moment. And then he fell back behind me again, and he stuck right behind me. This time, I stopped in the middle of the road, and I go, stopped in the middle of the race. He came around. Anyway, eventually, he did kind of stay on my side. We made it through the turnaround together. We started back. And I'm thinking to myself, Simon's younger than me. He's much faster than me. If it comes down to a sprint at the finish, I lose and he wins. There's no way that I can out-sprint Simon Lessing. I just knew it. And so I'm thinking, what can I do? And it took a while to come up with a strategy on this one. I thought, what I'm going to do, and this is right when I got to about 5 miles to go, halfway back from the turnaround, I thought, I'm going to just slowly ratchet up my pace and my speed. I'm not going to go fast and surge and try to drop him, because if I surge really fast, Simon he has that top end speed. He knows that I won't be able to maintain a surge, that I'll have to back off. So he'll stay with me, and then when I back off, then he'll get to rest also. So I thought, let me slowly build the pace, so slowly that he doesn't actually know that we're starting to go faster. Just do it slow enough so that hopefully he will think that he's actually starting to get tired, because it's starting to get more difficult to stay right with me. So I thought, okay, I'm running at about 90% of max effort right here. So I'll go up to 91%, and then to 92%. And I'll just keep going like that. And I will go up to about 99% when we get close to the finish, if I have to, because I know that I will, if he's with me, then I will need to sprint, and I will need something extra. I can't be maxed out when we start that sprint. I slowly built the pace. I could feel Simon starting to feel the pressure of it was getting harder and harder to hold on to the pace that I was setting. Finally, he snapped. The rubber band broke, and he slowly started to drift back. At first, it was only a couple feet, and then it was a couple more feet, and then a little more. And I didn't look back. I waited until I couldn't hear his feet anymore. I couldn't hear his breathing anymore. And at one point, I did just glance back, and I could see that he had definitely a big gap had opened up. But I thought, I have to keep ratcheting it up as if he is right next to me, because he is so strong. If I slow down, he may regroup and catch up with me. So that's what I did all the way to the finish line. An amazing, that final victory. The lesson from that is that competition is competition. And sometimes, again, we have to come up with strategies that we just had no idea that we were going to have to put in place. But that it's so worth trying something that you've never even thought of before when it comes to you in a race. Because in the race, the things that come to you are going to be the real gems that maybe will enable you to have that dream race, not only today, but in the future at other ones. Okay, so those are just some of the stories from my racing in Nice, France. It's as I said, an amazing, incredible place. The Mediterranean there is this deep, powdery blue. There's these places where water from underground comes out, and it just makes it this baby powder blue, just this incredible color. The hills that you ride through in the race are just amazing. And like I said, people get nervous about the climbs because we don't really have climbs or descents like that anywhere in the U.S. that I've experienced anyway. But you're so taken by the beauty of the landscape and the hills and these ancient old villages that you're going through that you kind of forget about all that stuff, and it just becomes this wow experience. And then running along the Promenade des Anglais, there are thousands of people. I mean, it's just packed. The energy is just amazing, and you will feel, any of you who are racing at the Ironman 70.3 Worlds this September in 2 weeks, you will feel the history of triathlon in this place. 1982 again was the very first year of the race. It maintained it was the Nice International Triathlon all the way up until 2004, and then I think it was in 2005 it transitioned over into being Ironman France. This year, Ironman 70.3 Worlds in Nice in 2 weeks. It's going to be incredible. I'll be there. A lot of the athletes that I coach will be there. Some of you are actually listening today, so I'm glad you tuned in today. And watch it live on Ironman's Facebook Watch. I'll be posting out some reports also. It's going to be a great day. Great 2 days of racing, actually. So let's see if anybody has any questions. Feel free to put them in there. Claudio's asking if my bike in 1993 was the most comfortable. Actually, the best bike that I ever rode was one that Huffy made for me in 1995 for my final year of racing, and it was the first bike that I had that was actually kind of like the real first edition of what you see today, like with the aerodynamics and just all the thought that went into where can we reduce the wind resistance on this frame and on this bike and when the person's on it. And it was the first bike that I got on when I took it on the very first ride. It was the experience was that, oh my God, this is the first bike I've ever been on where I can feel that I am now being limited by my fitness and not by this air drag that is very real. Nowadays I ride a Ventum, quantum leaps from that Huffy. But anyway, that was the best bike that I think I ever rode. See if anybody else has a question or two here. Sandy's asking about Col d'Avance. The climbs, let me just give you a general secret about climbs. the the way that you're going to have your best climb is to as you approach the base of the climb, back off a little bit, let your heart rate drop just a little bit. You know, you'll be a lot on the flats as you're going out to where the climbs start, and then you're going to head up. And as you head up into the climbs, let your heart rate drop just a little bit, okay? And then start into the climb and slowly build your pace, your power output, your heart rate until you hit the point where it's like, okay, this is good. I'm giving a good effort here, but I know I can also sustain it. I'm not going to blow up. Most people go into a climb full speed. They try to hold that speed, and then their heart rate skyrockets. And then with the load of the climb already on their legs, they have to back off to let their heart rate drop. And when there's load on your legs like that, it is so much harder to get your heart rate to drop. You have to back way off to get it to drop. And I've done some tests recently with this concept on Zwift, on my bike, testing different ways of approaching climbs, and I can guarantee you that that's the best thing that you can do. And then you just settle in. You settle in, you scoot back a little bit on your seat, you sit more upright, and you just engage those climbing muscles. Your cadence is going to drop a little bit, and make sure you shift down into a gear that then enables you to just get into that rhythm. And like I said, you're going to be so taken by the beauty that a lot of this is just going to happen because your thinking brain's going to turn off, and you're just going to be out there in the Maritime Alps, just going, "Wow, this is really cool." Mark's right; he told us this in the live chat. See what else we have here. Anybody's got some questions? Did I ever race Dave Scott in Nice? Yes, I did, Randy. It was the second year of Nice, and Dave Scott had heard about it, so he thought, okay, I'm going to go there. He came. I had a great swim, a great bike ride, a big lead partway through the run, but as I approached the last 5K, I completely fell apart. I bonked. The nutrition that I was taking in didn't work. I got within about 2 or 2.5 miles of the finish, and I all of a sudden I completely stumbled and fell down on the ground, and I caught myself on all fours, and I was able to slowly push myself back up, and it took a little, a few 5 seconds or whatever, and it was just enough that I got a little bit of energy back. And so I started walking, and then I started jogging, and I could feel Dave Scott. I had, I don't know, 4 or 5 minutes on him, but I could feel him just eating up that chunk of time with every step that he was taking. I was able to jog again, walk a little bit, jog really slowly. I thought, just get to the finish, get to the finish, get to the finish. And I was able to cross the line ahead of him by a minute or a minute and a half. But it was such a... It was like this primitive feeling of being an injured prey, and the lion was coming ready to eat me. And so yeah, Dave did race there. He never won that race, but he raced it a number of times. So Danilo's saying, winning strategies are not written in the books. They're written on the day by special physical and mindsets, by winning athletes who are capable to read the situation before in training set and the race according to the challengers. You're saying I have a special physical and mental mix that made me successful. Well, it's... I think all of us have something that's special. Some people will win races, some people will set records, some will never win. But we can all go out there and if we tune in, we do our training in advance, and then when we get to the race, we try to give it everything we have. And in the moments where we have those down periods, which every race has, where it gets maybe too difficult, you're going up a climb and you think, I can't hold it, then you come up with those new strategies. Okay, let me back off a little bit. Let me just click it 2 gears easier instead of 1. Whew, I feel much better now. And then you can get it back up and rolling again. So whatever strategies I came up with, again, they were I think there are things that we can all do if an outcome is important to us and we don't give up. Instead of giving up, ask ourselves, what can I do to turn this around? That's a very different mindset. And that's always what I tried to do, was to not give up, but ask myself, what can I do to turn this around? Okay? So how do you prepare for a tough hilly bike and a flat, fast run? Danilo is asking. Um, well, you do a lot of hilly rides in your training, and you do a lot of fast, flat running in your training. Pretty simple because they're kind of different muscle groups, cycling and running. So you can develop that strength you need for cycling, and you can develop that speed you need for a very fat. That's hard to say. A fat run, a flat, fast run. Okay. For me, I did a lot of track work before I went to Nice, just so that I did have that speed. Certainly, I did some long runs, and I did actually some hilly long runs, just so that I had integrity of muscular strength while I was running. Because even on a flat run, you're going to have pounding impact, and your muscles will start to break down, and that can slow you down. But if you do some hilly training in your run, along with those faster, flatter workouts, you'll have the muscular strength to withstand the impact of running fast, and you'll have the speed from your training. Okay? So anyway, I hope you enjoyed that. Here's one of the covers from the Nice Triathlon that Triathlete Magazine put me on. It was a year when Aaron Baker and I were voted Triathlete of the Year. Anyway, as you can see, I was pretty down and dirty. It's like you can tell it wasn't just like this nice, neat little package that I was doing out there. It took a lot, and I gave everything I had at those races, but it was so worth it because it was such an amazing place to race. I can't wait to go back there. I'll see a bunch of you in France in a couple weeks. For those of you watching from home, I hope you enjoy the 2 days of racing. And thank you especially for stopping by today. Mark Allen Coaching Zwift group live chat on Facebook from the shed, where I have shed talks. If you need coaching, markallencoaching.com. And also Dave Scott and I are starting a new series that'll run through Kona this year called 1989 The Story. And it actually is being published by Scott Zagarino, my business partner in my coaching. He's been around the sport for a long time. He was the guy who got the Gatorade sponsorship for Ironman. He was involved with ITU. He was the person who made sure that there was equal prize money in the very first ITU World Championships between men and women in Avignon. He's affected just about every aspect of the sport. Anyway, now in my coaching, he's helping me out with my marketing. He's amazing with it. But he knows the backstory of 1989 and all the different things that Dave and I had to go through to get to that race in the type of shape so that we could have that amazing epic battle, which it was 30 years ago. So Scott approached the two of us and said, hey, why don't you guys collaborate on a series of stories telling things that happened that led up to that race that probably nobody else has heard before except for your family and friends. And so we've put together 10 stories. The first one just posted a couple days ago, and it's going to give you a real depth and foundation so that you can understand why that was such an amazing race. Scott's publishing these weekly, pushing them out, and they will be on 1989thestory.com. You can read the first one as of this moment when we end this chat. It'll give you something to read. It's a cool story. All right, everybody, have a great rest of the day, and we'll see you soon.